Happy Friday. Welcome to Accessibility News. Tracey, Delisle, and myself are on here every week, and we try and bring on some experts in different fields. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dax Castro. Dax is definitely a person I look up to in the digital space with regards to documents, because as anyone that's familiar with website accessibility knows, PDF has become a four-letter word in some arenas.
That is true.
So just to kind of give anyone a little bit of quick introductions, we'll kind of go around the room here. My name is Glen Ingram. I own a couple of companies in the digital web space niche that specialize in accessibility. So it's my goal just to help educate, inform, and let business owners know what they're responsible for, so they hear about it maybe in something other than the form of a complaint or a lawsuit. Tracey, will you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Tracey with Certified Access Services. We are a group of CASP inspectors go out and inspect businesses for accessibility, primarily in the 11B arena, which would be commercial or public accommodation. We look at what they have and keep reports confidential, and we keep them safe from a lot of these serial litigants that are out there filing cases against them, and at least they have some awareness of what exists on their property and help them get through that. And we are a great team in this because I only do the architectural portion of it, and I am not a techie by any means, nor do I want to be. But that's why I love working with Glen, who knows all about that. I'm so glad to meet you, Dax, and I expect this is going to be interesting. There's a lot of stuff coming up in the world of hearing awareness right now.
Absolutely. And my name is Dax Castro. I am an Adobe certified PDF accessibility trainer. I'm also certified as an accessible document specialist by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. All of that to say, I know stuff about making PDFs not so much a four-letter word. And I work for a company called AbleDocs. We're a worldwide leader in document accessibility, providing solutions anywhere from millions of documents per month for large financial institutions to providing technical training for helping your teams become better at creating accessible documents. So Glenn, I'm so glad you have me on as a guest. I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be a great session.
Well, we look forward to picking your brain, Dax, because again, I have the unfortunate opportunity to constantly tell people that the way they were doing documents, particular PDFs, has to change. And in my experience, trying to teach them that if someone created this 3 generations away, it's a lot more expensive and a lot harder if we can make it accessible. And that the fact that, if we don't understand accessibility from the beginning, how expensive it is to have documents like this on a website. So I'd like you to kind of start off, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of sharing some of your experiences and thoughts with regards to virtual documents displayed on websites.
Absolutely. So accessibility at the beginning is always the best choice. When it comes to accessibility at the end, it's always more time consuming, more expensive, and often it's where the shortcuts happen. Because it's like, oh, we don't have time for this, or oh, we're not going to worry about color contrast. That's just too much of a lift, or our brand colors are red and green, and so we're really not going to change all our charts and graphs in this document, right? But if you think about accessibility at the beginning, you can start to plan for those things, and so people tend to be more accepting to change when you start at the beginning, because when you are 3/4 of the way in, or it's been released and all of a sudden someone says, hey, we just released this report, can you make it accessible? I mean, that's always the worst case scenario, because oftentimes there's little things that could have been done along the way to make the process a half hour or an hour versus 8 or 10 hours, or sometimes more, depending upon what it is and what we're doing. So
we definitely need to get away from the old adage that there's never enough time to do it right, but there's always enough time to do it over.
That is true, and in document accessibility, that a truer statement has not been made. So it is definitely something that I think the thing that gets me most is that people, they think it's just a press of a button. They think it's just, oh, you just run this thing and it makes it accessible. And I've done some screen records on my YouTube channel's PDF accessibility. And I've done some screen records of me going through and remediating a document or even testing a document with a screen reader. And I think the one thing that people always do, they always go, oh, I didn't realize it was so much, that there's so much to this. And I think, I have a mantra. It's awareness, knowledge, and implementation, right? So you first have to have that awareness of what accessibility really is, how it applies to documents or web or even the built environment, right? And then, having the knowledge of, okay, now that I know that it exists, what do I do about it? And then finally, doing the thing that you need to do to make it accessible. That's the implementation phase, right? And then someone just brought up something the other day. There's a fourth one that I have yet to add to my little mantra, which is improvement, because there's always ways to make things more accessible, more rich, better, more user experience. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I've had some people say, well, can't we just make these PNGs instead of PDFs? And I said, sure. Can we explain everything in 140 characters?
Yeah.
Because that's all you have to put in an alt tag. So,
well, we get that with tables. I get a lot that people like, this table's too hard to make accessible. Can't we just make it a JPEG and stick it in there? And I say, sure, let me show you this picture. And I show them a picture of a black screen. Mm-hmm. And I say, okay, now tell me what this is a picture of. I'm like, well, I can't see anything. Exactly. That's exactly what your client sees when they see a PNG of a table that says, fourth quarter projection report table. You're like, okay, what does that tell me? Nothing.
Yep. I've made several of these presentations, and mine always starts off with a white screen, because I tell people if it's not built properly, this is what certain people are going to hear and see.
Right. So I have a question, because I am not a techie. So I imagine there is the world that you work together. You may need some documents for websites, which I actually did not know. But what about, what is the most common document that the common person in business needs to know about, and which ones need to be converted to this? So I don't know a lot about document and what needs to be accessible and what doesn't. So are we talking about emails that get passed back and forth with attached document? What are we talking about for business?
So as a business, I think the thing that most people are dealing with are PowerPoints. We use it as a presentation format all the time. And usually there's a state mandate that says if you have a public meeting and you make a presentation, that you have to publish that information on the web to give other people access to it. So typically the way that works is someone will create a PowerPoint slide deck. They'll present it at a board meeting to a committee or a community about something that's coming up, some change or some construction project. And then that information needs to be disseminated to other people who weren't at the meeting. Well, in California, we have AB 434, which is a state legislature that says documents must conform to WCAG 2.1, which is section 508. I will tell you, for everyone listening that is confused about accessibility, almost every single guideline out there falls back to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, either 2.0 or 2.1 at an A or double A level. And really, there are nuances for sure for different geographic areas. But for the most part, if you stick to that, that is going to be your litmus test. So making these PowerPoints accessible for someone who has a second grade reading level, or for someone who has a cognitive impairment where they might have severe dyslexia, or they might not have sight. Those things need to be, the information inside that PowerPoint needs to be accessible. So they know there's a heading on the page, and maybe there's a bullet list with 5 items in it and what those bullets are, because without that, what they hear is just a bunch of run-on text as if you're reading a story. And so they're missing that information and relationships that we get to see as people with sight, with people who can read. We understand that's a heading, and here's a list, and here's an image of an aerial of a certain area, right? And so that's the core of accessibility, is to make that information accessible to people when they're reading it.
Well, and what I think is interesting about AB 434 is I did a presentation at USC a couple of years ago, and the next presenter was actually their internal accessibility council. And documentation, literally, this would have been 2019, so 2017, 2018 was sent from the DOJ to
Right.
all institutions that says not only does your website need to be accessible, but it's going to go to presentations, coursework, emails, and stuff like this. We're just on the cusp of this starting. We haven't seen what it's going to evolve into and how it's going to affect all different types of businesses. We're just hearing lawsuits over websites.
Well, it's interesting because AODA is, in Canada, I call them the tip of the spear, right? Because right now they are the first region that has actually put teeth to accessibility violations, right? So if they have a sliding scale. So based on the amount of accessibility violations you have in a given period of time and the severity of what they are, there's penalties that range anywhere from $500 to $25,000 and per incident. And if you are known as a CEO or manager of a project and you knowingly put out information that's not accessible, you can be individually accountable for up to $100,000 for lawsuits. So, I mean, it is or fines. They're not even lawsuits. These are fines by the government. So it's not about, here in the United States, it's, go to court and prove it. We just had Winn-Dixie overturned, and that's been a big thing in the news. But in Canada, it's not there's not a go prove it. It's, hey, there's a violation, you're getting fined, and you have to make it work.
Well, and the laws just went into effect in the UK August of last year, and we have because of everything that's gone on with there, we still don't know how that's going to shake down.
Yep.
Dex, in Canada, who is enforcing that? Do they have an enforcing agency for that specifically?
They do, actually, and there is a task force, and I don't remember the acronym off the top of my head, but it falls under a larger organization. So they call it the code, which is kind of our equivalent to ADA, and then they have another layer below that has five different categories, and one of them is communication, and that's where the AODA kind of falls under that communication role, and there is a task force going out and making sure that that's right now. And also AODA, any company with more than 50 employees, if you're a public company with more than 50 employees in certain market sectors, your stuff has to be accessible. Now, in the United States, if you're federal or state, you have to be accessible, but it hasn't really spilled over into the private sector quite yet, but it's coming. The UNRU I don't want to say it's the UNRU law act, the UNRU Act, exactly. I don't know what's the act or a law, but the UNRU Act, actually some of accessibility falls under that, and there's ways to connect those dots there. So it is starting to be a thing, and I will tell you that this has been. Accessibility has been around well before 2008 and early on 2012 there was some legislation which nobody listened to. Then they said, okay, in 2017 we're going to make it something you got to listen to, and then in 2019 they implemented some statutes, and there's no way around it. You are going to have to really focus on accessibility. But there's countries like Australia who have said, this kind of goes back into your other topic, in that Australia has said we are HTML first, Glenn. So, they're like, we're ditching PDF if we can help it and becoming more HTML focused, which I get, because their thing is that, look, a mobile device is not there yet. If you want to digest a PDF document in a mobile device, it's a different experience than inside a computer. So we want to make things as accessible as possible. I know Leonard Rosenthal from Adobe is working on a liquid mode for Acrobat so that it can be more like HTML and more digestible. But that's still in a beta testing thing. So it's a journey, right? It's a journey.
Absolutely. Well, when you listen to the serial litigants in the United States, their stand is that these laws have been in place since the 1990s, and therefore you've had plenty of time. But as you know, the world is evolving for digital very fast, and it's very hard for a small mom and pop business to, try to keep up with all of this and run their day-to-day operations. So I see both sides of it and understand both sides of it. But if some of these, Adobes and things like that would make it a little more friendly and, help the end user understand, the end user in the case for us business, be able to put it out there and be compliant and know that they're compliant is really what I hear the struggle of most businesses in the United States. They just don't know and fall into category of me. I don't know if it's compliant or not because I don't look at it and understand that. My world, I get to learn about it, but the average person that's running a coffee shop or something, it's very hard for them to understand that. So we need to educate more, which is part of why we're doing this, right, Glen? Is to help educate the community.
Well, I will tell you that I will work myself out of a job here. So accessibility, literally 80% of accessibility is using the tool the right way. If you use Word and you use the styles inside Word, heading 1, heading 2, bullet, right? You're not manually highlighting something and making it bigger, and manually inserting bullets. If you just use styles, you're 80% accessible. That's if you just do that. And what people don't understand is that, I was talking with my kids the other day about typing, right? And the idea of not being able to type is such who doesn't know how to type in this day and age? But when I was growing up in high school, we took a typing class to learn typing, right? In this day and age, if I said, who doesn't know how to use Word, right? That's a pretty accurate statement. Everybody knows how to use Word. It's kind of the word processing, it's what you use, right? But so many people have learned so many bad habits in their way to use the program that when it comes to accessibility and trying to get that document out, you've now created a bunch of barriers you weren't aware existed. And that's why, AbleDocs has a tool called Access Word that's a plugin that sits inside Word that helps you fix some of those errors. So when you export that PDF, you don't have to worry about knowing all these rules and laws. It just comes out accessible. And there are other programs out there too. We're not the only one, but by far, I feel like we do what you say, which is bridging the gap between I just need to run my business and create this PDF, this Word doc, and I just need to know it's compliant, right? I don't need to be an expert. I don't need to know all this stuff. So, but I will tell you, literally just using the programs the way that they were designed to be used will get you 80% of the way there.
Because everything, we look at anything on Microsoft products, your Excel, your Word, when you look at some of these Adobe things that Dax was talking about, do a little bit of homework, jump on YouTube, do a video. They all have accessibility built in at least a learner to immediate level. Now, you may need someone like Dax to finish it and push you across the finish line. But if you do that right properly, it costs a lot less money to hire a professional to push it across the finish line.
Well, the checker in Microsoft Word, it is super easy. You run the checker. It gives you some errors. You click on the error. It tells you what to do. You can go fix it, right? The problem is that if you aren't familiar with the things to watch out for, I've seen documents where somebody's created a 2-column layout, but instead of using the 2 columns in Word, they made a floating text box in one column and a floating text box in the other column and just kind of manually lined it up. And you're like, okay, I get why you did that because you didn't understand how to use columns, but now you really can't make the document accessible in a very easy way, right? And then to go back and say, oh, you need to redesign the document. They're like, oh, accessibility is so hard. No, if you use the program the right way, accessibility is natural and it just comes easily. It's just a little bit of retraining.
And we see that from a digital aspect. It's not being too cute. Understanding that you have CSS for a reason and it can be your friend.
Yeah.
Don't make headings just based on size and you like the way it looks. Control it, but have your structure put in place properly.
Well, you talk about structure. I see so many websites that start H3, H4, H2, H1. And I'm like, look, if you start with an outline for your web content, you literally, I even tell people for PowerPoint and Word, there's an outline mode you can use. And if you start there and put your content in as an outline, you almost can't fail, right? But when you just start typing and you just start going, you tend to not think about it in a logical way, and it's all visual, right? And again, accessibility, there are a lot more barriers than visual, but it's really the core of accessibility is bridging the gap between the visual relationship and the technical relationship, the structural relationship.
Okay, I have a question for the two of you, because if we've seen anything with these lawsuits, it's, you have physical and digital, and they keep working back and forth and playing off one another. As we see these digital documents being an issue with lawsuits, it's only a matter of time before people realize, hey, this menu doesn't work for colorblind people. This doesn't work in my store for this type of disability because it's a document, it's some type of thing like this, that we're going to start seeing physical lawsuits, I think, at some point for menus, because there's not enough color contrast, especially for us guys that are getting up around that 5-0 mark. They're getting a little bit more colorblind. The lighting's not very good. I can't read a menu. Someone's going to get irritated and find another reason to sue people. So do you see these kind of working hand in hand as we move forward, and how one, it's going to influence physical and physical is going to influence digital?
Yes, so I definitely would agree that that's happening. We see the crossover, what we call double dipping, where they'll pick an exterior accessibility item, hoping to get a property owner, and then they'll go on the inside and state that they can see an architectural barrier. There is no doubt in my mind that they're going to start picking on the items of menus, and everything is digital these days, and doing things like that. So if you have, a lot of them, because of the whole no touch things, they have these codes on your, on the table. They're not giving out menus anymore. All of a sudden, that's going to become an issue. If it doesn't work, what are their alternatives? Then again, they're just plain, putting it on paper that may not be readable for someone, the size font. There's all of these different things that a business owner is going to have to think about as they're moving through. But yes, so we'll call it the triple dip at that point, because you'll see a single lawsuit that will apply all three.
I will tell you, I walked out. So I love sushi, and being in the accessibility world, it's like being a graphic designer. You can't look at something and not look at typography or color or space or kerning, all of that stuff, right? From an accessibility standpoint, I can't look at a document and a menu or whatever and not see color contrast barriers or the, what resizing or reflow. I walked out of a sushi restaurant because they had a QR code for the menu. I pulled it open on my phone. It wasn't responsive. It was simply a scan of a JPEG of their menu that I had to move back and forth and zoom in and zoom out. I'm like, I don't have time for this. If they don't care enough to make this right, knowing that we're in this digital age, I can spend my money at other places. And I went to a different sushi place and I spent a good fair amount of money. So, I think part of it is using our dollars, also, but awareness, right? I look back on that and I probably should have gone back to the owner and said, hey, I just want you to know we're going to go ahead and take off, but I wanted to give you some advice. If you're going to provide a digital menu, please don't just scan a JPEG. Don't just throw something in here. Make it easy for people. I couldn't imagine if I were, I do have a little bit of vision, low vision. I'm going to be 50 in October. So I'm right there with you, Glenn. But, and I do have some issues. A lot of times I use my phone to magnify a printed menu because the color contrast isn't good enough or the lighting isn't good enough. And I really feel like that we're going to see a lot more of that. But I think it's a benefit. I think, like with anything, you can abuse things, right? You can always push the line and just try to sue someone to be litigious. But I feel like, that there's a positive here that we really should be thinking about that benefits people, and not just blind people, right? Accessibility benefits everyone. Mm-hmm. We were talking on our podcast just this last episode that we released on Tuesday. We had someone from, Charissa Ramirez from New South Wales government in Australia we were talking about the built environment. And we were talking about level access onto public transportation. And about 3 years ago, I broke my leg and I ended up on a knee scooter, which the worst thing I'd ever wish on anyone. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. And trying to get up the ramps for the light rail. And then you have to be at the very beginning to have them come out and open the door and let you in. And if you aren't out at the right time, you can't get there quick enough. They just take off. And so having a level platform would have really helped. And then, of course, no knee scooter. Now I'm just kind of limping in a boot or no boot. and I'm trying to get up those stairs and it's packed and you can't. And, it was a huge pain. So I feel like it's not just, everybody thinks of blind people when we think of, document accessibility, but even in the built environment, there's so many more benefits to everyone.
Absolutely. I mean, we see that all the time, just the little things. And in our world, they are always thinking about the wheelchair, but you're right. I mean, there's short-term disabilities and long-term, and everyone always goes right to the long-term. And they don't think that, you could be disabled, tomorrow, break your leg, and there you go. And that's when it really starts hitting people, when they can't get around and they realize that there are true barriers. Like it makes it so that it's not possible for you to enjoy that or have that experience, or get some transportation. So that's why we continue to educate the best that we can.
Well, I will tell you, I have never been more aware of curb differences in curb cuts and things than when you're on that death scooter, because those solid rubber tires, the moment they hit any variance in grade, you go head over heels. And there were a couple times where I fell. And of course, you feel terribly embarrassed when you fall over and everybody's like, oh my gosh, let me help you, and you're just like, yeah, okay, and I, I've hurt myself a couple times. So yeah, and I would have never thought about that a 1/4 inch difference or a 1/2 inch difference between one sidewalk and another could make that big of a difference.
Absolutely. When I do employee training, I will often bring a wheelchair or some sort of scooter or something like that, and we let them get on and move through their restaurant where, the tables are all too close, and we, get them to go up a ramp, and you could see their eyes like, oh, I can't do this. Exactly. So what can we do? There's so many little things that we can do to just make that a little easier. And Glenn and I talk about this often, that when you open that up to the disabled community, they will come and spend their money there. So just like when you walked away from the sushi shop, I'll bet you if you go into a place and they have made some effort, you go back.
Yep, absolutely. No, I feel like there's brand loyalty. My wife has celiac disease. And so for people who, we are very brand loyal when it comes to people who provide gluten-free pizza or gluten-free items on their menu. And we go back and back and back. And the gluten-free community, the word spreads. And I can only imagine in the disability community, people will, that information gets spread and people like, oh, where did you go? Oh, I went there. And, oh, by the way, they have accessible bathrooms, or they've got, their menu, they've got it in large print. And I really appreciated that. And, whatever. So, I mean, there's definitely opportunity for businesses to take advantage of being more inclusive, and reaching more of their audience.
Well, I'd like to back that a little bit to an instance we just talked about. We were talking about that menu. For business owners to understand how important it is to make sure they have different accessibility specialists along the team. Yep. Because we just saw where they took something to take care of the physical because they didn't want to have a menu to communicate germs. They made it digital, and they made it digital in a way that didn't work. Yep. Just like we see people that are going to post photographs of their restaurant or their bar, and they're going to post physical violations that now all of a sudden the people that are suing on the physical part, they're opening up themselves from a lawsuit. I think it's imperative that every business has different parts of their team aware and knowledgeable about accessibility. Otherwise, they're going to stub their toe in some way, shape, or form. What are your guys' opinions on that?
Well, I think that, there from a corporate level, you're seeing more and more of these accessibility officers, accessibility compliance managers, accessibility product managers. And you're going to see that more and more in the larger corporations. The smaller corporations, restaurants and smaller businesses, doctors, lawyers, maybe even, veterinarians or, dentist's office. I can think of all the patient chairside education, right? You go get a wisdom tooth out and they send you home with a PDF document or a care document about how to care for your mouth or whatever you just had, right? They're not thinking about accessibility. And someone so we have a PDF accessibility Facebook group, and there was someone in there who reached out to me and said, hey, I'm a veterinarian. We give aftercare sheets for our animals when they have a certain surgery. I want to make these all accessible for our clients. How would I go about doing that, right? And so that's where that training comes in. And the training is out there. I mean, there are definitely resources, but they're harder to find, and you really have to seek. It's like you don't know what you don't know, right? And so it's one of those things where sometimes you open that can of worms and you're like, wow, this is a whole lot, and I'm trying to manage my practice and I'm trying to do all this other stuff. And that's, I think, where you're going to see a lot more. Colleen Gratzer is a good friend of mine, and she runs a creative agency, and she does a lot of that work for these smaller companies where they're like, hey, I need to make this accessible. They don't have time to be an expert. So they're going to, farm that out to a company where they've got the experience to make it accessible and take that workload off of them. The idea that you can just do it all yourself, I think, is going to be a less and less frequent thing. So,
right. I think, Glenn, that kind of brings, your point to be valid, that businesses need a team, and they need to understand that there are people, like us out there that are willing to help you, and that it's far more cost effective to have that support team there that's going to look after you. We continue to go in and look after our clients well after we've done the inspection, to help them or their vendors when they hire vendors. So knowing that you may be a small company, but you can have a team, a village of support that will help you make your business accessible and succeed. And we're going to continue to send businesses as well. I certainly promote all the businesses that are being proactive in accessibility. I'm always sending that information out, but you're going to need to have that, and understanding the resources and where they are makes a difference. Glenn and I often, if someone's looking for architectural, he'll send them to me. When it's web accessibility, send them to you. Obviously, when I now hear about, document stuff, I've got to be able to send them on. So I may not have the answers. We are all resources for those type of support systems to all of our businesses that we work with.
One of the products that we have at AbleDocs is a ability to put a plugin into your website and constantly scan. So as you upload a document, it'll check it for accessibility and let us know, or let the client know based on a report. Here's the 10,000 pages, PDF documents you have on your website. 80% of them are this level of accessibility, and 20% of them are this level. And they can actually even submit the document directly to us from that application. So it's that having those extra tools to be able to not have to go, okay, I've got to become that expert, or I've got to develop this department. I think knowledge is great, and I think everyone should have some level of accessibility knowledge. But sometimes, it's like, I know how to fix my car, but there are times where I'm going to take it to the mechanic to go fix it, right? Because I want to be sure that it's done correctly. I want to, maybe I can do a alternator, but I'm not going to go do a head gasket, it is, it's where we can rely on those experts. And as document accessibility becomes a more and more of a forefront item, you're going to find, IAAP, the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, just came out with a test for Accessible Document Specialist, ADS, right? And that is helping more people have a good foundation for accessibility and understanding what it all means and how to make it happen.
Well, I think what I see all the time, and I'm sure you guys see it, I'm interested to see what you guys say about this, is not understanding how to hire the proper specialist. So whether it be a building inspector versus a CASP, whether it be, a web designer versus someone who works in accessibility, and it's expanding beyond that so quickly. Example, we had someone that reached out to us. They had a Shopify site they want to make accessible. Spoke to them on Monday. They said, what else do you do? And we talked about different services we offer as a digital marketing company. And they said, well, our traffic's down. Would you take a look at this? They didn't tell us they also had a WordPress blog. We took a look at it, and their WordPress blog had been hacked. They had 1,000 new articles posted for mail enhancement, and over 4,000 links built to those pages in the last 60 days.
Yep.
So after a difficult conversation, not so pleasant for my potential client, we had to go over this. But it's another example of having alarms, having systems on everything you're doing so that you know what's going on, kind of like you mentioned with the documents and stuff like this. I think there are certain companies that do advertisements on TV that says, oh, business is easy. Just do this and you'll be out on the beach this afternoon. Business isn't easy. It's getting more and more complicated. And if you don't have qualified professionals in every aspect of it, your ability to have a problem is increasing exponentially. I mean,
one of the things I see a lot are, and as a matter of fact, I just presented on accessibility accountability in a post-pandemic world for a 3Play Media just had a conference, Access at Home. And one of the things I talked about was the idea of accessibility startups. Right? Everybody seems to be jumping on the bandwagon for accessibility. And just because you're an IT company and you know that ARIA tags are a thing, doesn't mean that you can build an accessible website. If you can't test with a screen reader, if you can't project manage a project that has accessibility components in it and know what those milestones are along the way, document accessibility the same way, right? These companies like, oh, we can make your documents accessible. I get those all the time. They're like, hey, we did all the heavy lifting. Can you just take a look at this real quick and let me know if I missed anything? And it's a train wreck. It's completely not right at all because they just got green check marks. They just were looking at the checks and they didn't think about the usability of the document, or they didn't understand that PDF UA has these other checks that check for even more things to make your document even more compliant, right? And so there's lots of ways to fake it. And unfortunately, business owners suffer because they don't understand. That's why certifications like ADS, right? CPAC, those certifications will help business owners understand if that client, if that vendor has the right qualifications to actually do the work.
Absolutely. I mean, we definitely see that in our world. We'll get contractors that say, no, we've been doing this for years. We know what we're doing. And they'll actually try to, argue with us. And, we have to really sit down and explain to them why it's so important to make sure that they, from this point on, continue to do it right. I constantly hear in Glen's world, my web designer said they know what they're doing, but they're calling me. And I was like, well, then why did you get sued? I mean, why are you being sued if it's right? I can't tell you, but I'm going to send you on to somebody that can explain it. And the same thing now, I think with documents, it's going to be the same thing. Someone's going to tell them that it's compliant, but with certification programs, it really helps them say, well, if you don't have that certification, then you may not know exactly what I need. So I think it's going to be important to make sure that there are some specific certification programs for all of our industries. I mean, we're certainly certified by the state of California. And I don't know if you know, but, California, we're crazy here. I can say that I was born and raised, but we're crazy here.
I'm in Sacramento, so I am with you.
So that's just the way it is. But I constantly
I will tell you that, at AbleDocs, I was recently hired, just started a couple of weeks ago at AbleDocs. We are starting the AD Academy, AbleDocs Academy, which will be a virtual training ground for accessibility that's unlike anything that's out there right now. Right now, you can take a couple courses here and there. DQ's got some great courses, Level Access. Different companies have different courses, but nobody has a soup to nuts, start at the beginning, what is a tag, down to advanced accessibility remediation and testing. And that's what I'm building. That's what I've been came aboard with AbleDocs to develop. And with Chad Chilius, who's another great powerhouse in accessibility. Chad has been on LinkedIn Learning for I don't know how many years now, and I have the fortunate luck to work with him on a daily basis. And we're going to build this thing out that's going to be amazing. And it's going to go beyond just a series of videos, but you'll be able to actually tap us as experts to be able to go through the worksheets and examples with you, so that maybe you watch the video, you do the exercise, right? Most of the time we watch a video and we walk away going, did I get it? You go try it on a document. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But imagine you could work through an exercise and then have the instructor who you just learned it from on the video sit with you for a half hour and go over your document and tell you what you did wrong and tell you what you did right. I think that's going to be the big thing that's going to really put it out there as a really good training tool. So we're excited.
Well, I'm going to wish you luck on that because I tried doing a little bit of coaching on this stuff back in 2019, and I stopped coaching and started putting videos out there because the video didn't argue with me.
And that's okay. So in my Facebook group, we have 1,300 people in our PDF accessibility Facebook group. And invariably, probably once every 2 weeks or so, I get someone who's a little headstrong who might say, oh, you can only have one H1 in your document, or, oh, you know, this has to be a certain way, or, oh, this doesn't qualify, or whatever. I don't mind that because I look at it and I go, look, I've been doing this for a while. My specialty is understanding the rules. I own a copy of ISO 14289. I own a copy of the 800 pages of the ISO 32000 PDF, guide. I read them. I've read every page, and I'm fully prepared to say, here's the rule. You can interpret it whichever way you want, but this is what they're going to fall back to. And, so it's like somebody tried to argue with me that, well, PDF UA doesn't talk about color contrast. So therefore you don't have to be, compliant. You don't have to worry about color contrast when it comes to PDF UA. I said, no, the line actually says for all color contrast, look at the rules in WCAG, and the rules of WCAG are what dictate it, because they didn't want to get into all that inside of PDF UA. And so it's about education. I feel like, look, my job is to give you the information. What you do with it, that's up to you.
Yeah, the funnest conversation I'd like that I was doing, they go meet up in Anaheim or something like that about 2.5, 3 years ago. And this young guy came in and he was just, I think, in a bad frame of mind. And he wanted to complain this, and no, you can't do anything. Nothing's defined. Nothing's regulated, blah, blah, blah. And by the time he got done with them, he finally said, you know what? I'm sorry. I wasn't in a good place when I came in here. No one's ever told me there were rules before. Everyone just said it was gray area and a bunch of BS. I'm like, well, you listen to the wrong people.
Yep. Well, it's like blank cells on a table. I hear that so many times. People are like, you can't have blank cells on a table. No, you actually can. It's just people who don't understand how to use a screen reader. They start fumbling through a table, and all of a sudden it skips a row or it skips a column because there's a blank cell. They're like, oh, that's a barrier. No. If I'm a native accessible technology user, I know what that means. I get that there's no data there. I understand that. But it's people who aren't day-to-day AT users that don't use JAWS and NVDA on a daily basis. They fumble through a document and then they start making up all these barriers, and then the rules get passed down. Now, I will say where it stemmed from was the Department of Health and Human Services has a rule that says you cannot have blank cells on a table. There are certain agencies that have developed more stringent rules that really make it almost impossible to have a confusion about how data might be related. And so HHS requires table summaries, right? If I go to a table, there needs to be a description before the table that tells me what the table's about. Well, the thing they don't understand is that JAWS, well, the most popular screen reader program out there, doesn't read table summaries in a PDF document. I'm like, okay, well, then now we're at 50% of the people aren't going to hear that table summary. And we just spent 2 or 3 hours or 2 or 3 days walking through this document, adding table summaries. What are we really accomplishing? So,
yeah, I think that the resistance out there is just not being educated.
Yeah. Well, but I also believe that, there are times where PDF isn't the... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You froze there for a second. I didn't mean to talk on top of you.
Oh, no, I was just saying, I think it just becomes from, a lack of education. I definitely get pushback every day, and it's okay. And I do like you do and just say, I'm just giving you the facts, whether you choose to follow through. And if a lawsuit comes up, I'm still here for you. And I don't want you to, be so bothered that you're not going to continue to come back for more information, because we are here to support you. And it is an educational time, but boy, I know we get pushback. And I know when I first started, I kept saying, yeah, it's okay. Keep going, because once they figure out that you know what you're talking about, it's going to take people that say, I don't want your service, and that they, or whatever that means, says they've got it, then they get sued or somebody brings it to their attention, then they're going to come back around. but that takes a little bit.
Well, there's an agency that I won't name that deals with outer space that does a lot of documents, PDF documents, and that agency said, hey, we need to remediate this document. It's 2,000 page technical document, needs to be made accessible, and they're like, no. We're just going to put a disclaimer that says, if you want this document to be accessible, call this number and we'll work on it. That way we don't have to make the document accessible. And if they want it, then maybe we might do 1 or 2 a year. I said, well, if that person wants that 1,200 page document at 1 o'clock in the morning, and it takes you 3 weeks to get them that document, you're going to get sued for for inaccessibility. Right? If you had the ability to turn around and press a button and in 8 hours get them that document, yeah, maybe you've got a case. Maybe you've got a way to mitigate that, because by the time they've complained, they'd have to prove that there's time sensitive in that 8 hour window that would have caused them a loss or some kind of harm. Right. But the idea that you can just disclaim all your documents on your website and say, if you want them accessible, let us know and we'll work on it. That's not a solution. The other one I hear is undue burden. Oh, it's an undue burden. We can fall under this undue burden law. And I try to tell people, I say, undue burden is if you had 10 million pages and you only had a department of 3 people and your net income is $500,000 a year, and now somebody says you've got to make them all accessible, that would cost you more than your 10 years worth of salary. That's an undue burden. Beyond that, good luck, have fun.
Well, and don't you each encounter, I know we encounter this digitally, especially when we're talking to other developers like this, oh, you can't do this, because they think they understand a certain code or a certain rule, when I think inevitably this is not undifferent than any other thing in our life. Sometimes you don't have to take the path through. Sometimes the path around is easier. You just have to be open-minded enough to think about the ideas in order to make it work without just trying to beat your head against the wall.
There's my favorite saying is, there is no spoon. And I think I work it into almost every presentation I do. But once you realize for accessibility that there is no object, that you just have the tags tree. We get these complex infographics that maybe are these flow charts that move from, do this, if this happens, then go here. And these, and what they don't realize is that there typically there are paths to making that content robust and accessible, more than just saying alt text flow chart of what's such and such decision tree. Right. But you have to think outside the box. And that is the thing. Once you start to realize that how the tag tree functions and what you're trying to accomplish and how a screen reader user might want to digest this information, a whole world opens up. And now you've got all these extra ways to get around maybe some of the compliance issues, or how the document was designed, because it was designed in Illustrator or was designed in Photoshop or whatever,
Well, and don't each of you think that if people, it seems like when we have awareness, I know me particularly, when I first got into accessibility, I had no idea what was going on until I sat down with a gentleman that was blind and had poor hearing and watched how he absorbed the information that we take for granted. I think if we put somebody in a wheelchair, if we put somebody in and made them so they couldn't see, and put them in a restaurant, put them in a hospital, put them in some place like this, we take somebody and show them how a screen reader works. That the first time I heard a screen reader, I thought I was Matthew Broderick in War Games. Would you like to play a game?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little better than that, but it could be a lot better. I think if people just put themselves in these aspects and understood what was going on, they'd have a lot more open-mindedness and appreciation for what they need to do.
Agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah. DQ has an empathy lab. Charissa Ramirez, their Department of the South Wales, they have New South Wales, actually. They have an empathy lab. I really feel like there's a fine line between making someone feel sorry for someone and somebody understanding someone else's struggle. And you really have to focus on the understanding the struggle so that you can move forward. This is not I feel so bad for people who have to do this, while I do have empathy in that regard regarding the state of accessibility and how many PDF documents are not accessible. My goal is to give people a user experience that says, hey, if you do A, B, and C, this is the result that's going to happen for that user, good or bad, right? If you just do these quick things, look how much better the document's going to be for that person. And, I find the people who have most positive acceptance of accessibility are someone who's got a cousin who's got colorblind issues, or someone who's got mobility issues, or maybe it's a mom who's got someone in their family who's got a disability. They're a carer for someone, and I wish that it weren't that you didn't have to physically be touched by a disability in some way to be empathetic, to want to do the right thing, because it really is. It's about doing the right thing.
Agree.
I think one of the guests that I think has just kind of been, I'm kind of in awe of when we had Adriana Malazzi on a few weeks ago, and she's literally born with cerebral palsy, is almost like a quadriplegic in a wheelchair, and is the inspiration behind / inventor of this company called the Puffin that they built. That's a mouth controlled joystick that literally she controls her powerful wheelchair with it. She controls her phone with it. I mean, it's taking lemons and not making lemonade. We're talking about some lemon pie.
They're called sip and puff devices, and they're amazing. There are actually devices that people can use their tongue. It's a mouthpiece that goes in your mouth, and you use your tongue. We don't realize how sensitive our tongue can be in our mouth when we're trying to find that little piece that's caught in the back of your back tooth, or you're trying to get that little, maybe I bite my fingernails constantly and I get a little fingernail stuck and I'm trying to get it out. We don't realize how delicate of a technical that tool is. And being able to use that tool to move, to have mobility is really freeing, right? I mean, even just this tool, Uber, Lyft, being able to Grubhub, the ability to have, there's a program called Be My Eyes, right? And allows, and I have it on my phone. We covered it on a podcast episode that allows people to call in and say, hey, can you tell me which one of my shirts is green? Right? They're blind. They're trying to get dressed in the morning and maybe something got misplaced, or, can you tell me what this is a photo of? And they show you with their camera what's going on, and you get to be their eyes. How amazing, right? How liberating it is. Technology has given people the ability to be so much more self-sufficient. And I want to be a part of that. And that's why I do document accessibility.
Glen, it's very much like the guest that we had on, Ira.
Yeah, it's like Aria, but spelled different, AIRA.io, to where their glasses, the people that are blind could put on, and someone will speak into their ear and tell them where they're walking, read their mail, do all this stuff.
Wow.
That's awesome. It is really awesome. When they opened up their headquarters in San Diego, and I got the opportunity to put the glasses on and, close my eyes, and they got me through their office, and they put us through some obstacles. And it was incredible to have that person, like be walking by you, and they'll describe the person to you. So it is truly, the sky is blue today, and they're really being very descriptive about it. And they've got people from all over the world that are just watching through those glasses and helping people navigate through. They're even helping them cook in their own kitchen so that they can make meals and look. And I just thought that was great.
What is that company again? Can you tell me that?
AIRA, AIRA, and I think it was .ai or ARIO for TLD.
Yeah, it's AIRA.io. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, we had a lady on there that's blind, and she's their, I think, director of communications or something like that on, again, sometime in the last month or two. And yeah, that's the whole goal here, is just to have different experts, different people from different fields to help people just kind of understand what's going on within the realm of accessibility.
Well, I just signed up for that one, so I'll be getting a link in my email here shortly. I'm interested. So
nice.
Yeah.
You're back, Tracey. You were frozen for a moment.
I saw that. They blanked me out, and I thought, well, I said it was wrong, and it just kicked me right off and said, you were wrong. But,
the web police.
Yeah. That's right, the web police. Yeah. Great stuff. Did you say you're going to pass on some information about that company for him? Because they were a great guest as well.
He's already signed up to get some information from them.
Yep.
Yeah,
I have four monitors here. You would not believe that I have my dream setup, right? I mean, my computer, I can rip an 8-minute video in about 3.5 minutes. And I've got a big screen monitor there and 3 more monitors here, my microphone, of course. And I just need to find earbuds that will actually stay in my ear. I keep reaching up to fix them, and I've got to get ones that actually stay in.
I'll get them over to you. I have a backup pair that my wife gave me, and clips. Clips. They've always been big time in audio.
Right.
They have some that really fit in your ear very well.
Awesome.
Good to know. Good to know. Great stuff today. I mean, boy, sometimes when you guys are talking about it, I feel like my head's going to start smoking. Again, the need for you guys, because I know just enough to get everyone in trouble. So I know as soon as you start talking some technical stuff, I was like, oh, God, that's why we need them. They're such a good place in the world.
I have to pull myself in, right? Because a lot of the time I forget how technical it can go, how deep dive it can be, and it's just one of those things you just start talking and all of a sudden, and that's kind of why our Chax Chat podcast kind of came about. Chad and I would sit on the phone and talk about some struggle or some problem or whatever. And halfway through the conversation, we're like, this is gold. Like, people would want to hear about how we just walking through solving this problem that he was struggling with or whatever. And that's kind of how that podcast came about. So it's been really well received. So I was talking with Glen off air here about this format, and I really love this format as well. So we're, who knows where the roads go, but definitely document accessibility is a passion. And when we get together and start talking about it, it's really hard to quiet the mouth.
Well, this has been awesome. We really appreciate you coming on, Dax. Should anybody want to reach out with you, get some advice, or find out how to work with you, what's the best way to communicate?
So LinkedIn is a great resource. I'm on it all the time. I'm always posting with the hashtag A11Y. My email address is dcastro@abledocs.com, ABLEDOCS.com. Or you can join our Facebook group, PDF Accessibility. And the YouTube channel is PDF Accessibility too. We try to keep it run nice and easy for you, but I'm out there. I'm accessible. I promise. Just Google my name. You'll find me everywhere.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. It's been great getting to know you a little bit virtually over the past year, and it was great to have you on the show here today.
Well, thanks a lot, Glenn, and thanks a lot for being on here. I love listening about the built environment for accessibility, because it's a companion area, but it's not necessarily one I'm in a lot. So,
and I would say the same with you. It has been such a pleasure to learn about. I knew there was something about documents and accessibility, didn't know enough about it. Or knew just enough to get someone in trouble. So I would always just put that on. So it has been a pleasure to learn from you today, and know that I have a great resource to fall back on and send our clients to.
Absolutely.
All right. For everyone watching, we'll be back same bat time, same bat channels next week. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
All right.